Hello, my name is Bill Crow. I am an art historian and I live in Suffolk. And I've been fortunate enough for a number of years to be able to lecture to lots of people about art history. And during that time I may have lectured, talked about 100 times and covered probably 30, 40, 50 different subjects and looked at thousands and thousands of slides. Recently, I've been looking at slides for future talks, and I observed that things have changed. And they've changed, well, I say recently, my activities scanned back to about a post-war period from 1945 to 1955. And I've made a conclusion that at that point in time, things changed quite dramatically. As I scanned all my images, I looked back and I saw something in the art after that period, after that date, which indicated that certain subjects had completely disappeared from paintings that were becoming famous, much loved, and were part of the oeuvre of the post-war period. And I thought to myself, whatever happened to such and such? I couldn't find it in the post-war period. I cogitated for some period of time as to whether to pursue this. And I researched and researched, and I found there were a number of subjects that no longer appeared in our art. So I decided to produce a series of very short talks, just covering my concerns. So each talk has a different subject. And the title would be Whatever Happened To, and the current subject would be, in this case, compassion in art. Let me explain. We regularly go away for the winter in the south of France. Apart from anything else, it's bright, it's warmer, and it's cheap. And we don't do a great deal other than walk, enjoy the brightness, the lightness of the sunshine, the early spring sunshine, and visit art galleries. In our last trip, we went to the little gem, the Annonciade Museum in Saint-Tropez, and looked at the Seuras, the Signacs, the Bonnards and the Matisses. They're all gorgeous. They sparkle with the light of the Mediterranean, and the light blazes through the windows of the Annonciada, and the colours look extraordinary. And then we took a train to Nice and went to the Marc Chagall Museum. And you have all these beautiful representations of his strange, dreamlike art. Again, in dazzling colours, in a wonderful environment with huge canvases. And you could sit, of course, you could sit in the garden and have a picnic. Following that, we went up to Bormes Les Mimosas in the Var to see the paintings of Henri Rivière. He was a French Japaniste. To explain, he was influenced by Japanese art in the late 19th century. So he used the two-dimensional, non-perspective art of Japan as a way of representing the landscape in southern France. And it was very adventurous, very original, and it was such a beautiful gallery, very small one. So that day we returned, and I got on with my job of preparing notes for a series of talks that I was doing this year called A Fresh Look, a Fresh Eye on Some Old Masters, Caravaggio, Velasquez, Rembrandt and Goya. And I looked through their paintings, and to my amazement, the thing I was looking for stood out, probably like a very, very, very sore thumb. More than that, a thumb that had been mutilated. It was the lack of compassion in all the art. Not all the art, that's a dramatic exaggeration, but much of the art that has been produced since 1945. In my old masters, I could find beggars, I could find pictures of people with disabilities, I could find the poor being looked after by the young, being treated by the side of the road. I could find the little people, the dwarves, beautifully dressed and looking after animals in Velasquez. I could look at the horrors of war in Goya, and I could look at Rembrandt's endearing pictures of Christ teaching the old people in the church, in the cathedral, in the temple. There was none of this in the art after 1945. I look back at the first part of the century and looking at a fairly obvious place would be the art of the First World War. And so in my library, I fortunately had a painting, a print of this, a great painting called Gassed by John Singer Sargent. And I hope you will see, if we look at this for a couple of seconds, what I'm talking about. This picture is full of concern for these very young men in the First World War who had been gassed by mustard gas and were being led, blind, gasping and in pain away from the battlefield. War art was quite common in the First World War and in the Second World War. My next thought was that coming away from these exhibitions, these galleries, these museums that we've talked about, and the others, I had an overpowering feeling that they were trying to please us with dazzling displays of art candy. Pictures so dazzling and so beautiful that when reduced to postcard size could be used as wish you were here postcards for a tourist on holiday. They were extolling, they didn't mean to be advertising for the south of France. They just meant that you were looking all the time at the jollification of life in the south of France. The beautiful light, the trees, the landscapes, even in the modern art, it was an assemblage of beautiful colours. It was the most extraordinarily divine experience. But there was no hint of trouble. There was no hint of all the compassion that existed for 500 years. So my question is, what happened to the compassion after 1945? Well, perhaps after the horrors of the Second World War, nobody felt like reminding us once again of torture, of war, of injury, of disability. They wanted to please us. But beyond that, war continued to go on. There was more disaster, more scenes of awfulness, more hideous behaviour by our so-called civilized society. Where did it all go? Well, some people say it all went in photographs. But photographs are fantastic as records, superficial records of the past. But artists leaving their DNA on their representations, on their paintings, express it with a point of view. It is their job to heighten our perception. And my case rests. At this point, whatever happened to compassion in art, just take a look today. Thank you very much.